Here's a test of your thinking style. Does the rabbit go with the dog or the carrot? If you pick the carrot, you're likely inclined toward holistic thinking and look for relational or functional connections. But if you pick the dog, you're likely inclined toward analytic thinking and perhaps a bit weird. Analytic thinkers look for distinct categories. By weird, we mean people from populations that are Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Weird people are strongly inclined to prefer analytic choices. Whereas, while substantial variation exists, people from other societies tend to make more holistic choices. These differences represent just the tip of a large psychological iceberg. Other key domains of difference include individualism, conformity, guilt over shame, moral judgment, and trust in strangers. Unfortunately, nearly all of what science knows about human psychology comes from studies among weird people who lie at the extreme ends of global distributions in many domains. In a landmark new book, Joe Henrich, a professor at Harvard University, asks, how can we explain this psychological variation? Why did European populations, along with their cultural descendants in North America and Australia, end up so psychologically weird? Did these psychological differences play a role in the economic, political, and military expansion of European populations after 1500? Henrich shows how our minds are substantially shaped by the institutions, technologies, and languages that we encounter and adapt to while growing up. Beginning with the most fundamental of human institutions, this work reveals how the structure of families, kinship networks, and marriage culturally shapes many aspects of our psychology and helps explain much of the variation we see around the globe. But why do marriage practices and kinship networks vary so much? And how did weird people end up with such peculiar families? Tackling these questions, Henrich shows how the branch of medieval Christianity that became the Roman Catholic Church began adopting an unusual package of incest taboos, marriage regulations, and inheritance customs that slowly dissolved the complex family organizations of pre-Christian Europe and initiated a transformation towards monogamous nuclear families, a virtually unique form of family organization from a historical and cross-cultural perspective. The psychological footprints left by the Church's millennium-long campaign can still be detected in the minds of people today, both within European countries and globally. Contemporary populations that experienced more centuries under the Church show lower rates of complex kinship practices like cousin marriage, and a weirder psychology, including more individualism, less moral particularism, and greater trust towards strangers relative to family and friends. The social and psychological shifts unintentionally wrought by the Church's efforts fueled rising urbanization and the proliferation of impersonal markets, voluntary associations like charter towns, and even representative governments and Western law. Each of these new institutions then further shaped how people thought, felt, and perceived their worlds, eventually producing the weird minds we see today.